Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and welcome to Wisdom and Torah Ministries. Today's teaching is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about the time frame when Yeshua possibly was born according to Scripture. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole, Christmas, because, see, the whole Christmas thing, if I may for a few minutes, deals with emotion, family togetherness, for families who are dysfunctional, or many families who are functional, and they get together during that time frame. And so when you talk against Christmas, you are not only stating facts about holy and profane or not to worship God like the nations, but you are competing with emotions and connection, syncretism, and you're also competing with an emotional attach to that particular day. And consider that if you have someone who's suffered a lot when they're young, and that's the only day they have that they felt any kind of encouragement, or they felt included, or they felt loved. Now, when you talk about Torah and you present it to them in the context of should not be done, they're not going to understand it. So, again, I don't keep Christmas. I will never endorse Christmas, and I will never tell anybody that it's okay to keep Christmas. It's still wrong. It's not. It has no connection whatsoever with the Bible, and the Bible calls that worshiping God the way the nations worship their gods, or the worship their ways. Okay, so we need to learn how to separate one or the other. But instead of me focusing on why you should not celebrate Christmas, because the whole argument about Christmas nowadays is whether or not it's a Christmas tree or Santa Claus or it's the birth of Jesus. Forget about Santa Claus on the tree. I don't really care. That's not in the Bible. It's not related. It's not any connection with the Bible. So for that reason alone, I'm not going to celebrate that day, because as you know, that day is no longer connected with the Messiah. So the question really is, was Yeshua born December 25th? Now, you can take all kinds of extra biblical resources to try to prove the point. And, maybe take some verses in Jeremiah to try to apply it to the Christmas tree. And then you can have a debate and an argument. But I'm not going to get into that. The book of Luke, chapter 1, gives us a lot of information about the time frame. Listen, in Jewish mindset, the birth is not really the main essence of the human. It's the death, because when you die, you left a legacy. You came in with nothing, and you leave with a legacy, whether it's honorable or not. So therefore, in the Bible, it's only a few births that are spoken of. The birth of Benjamin, how chaotic it was. The birth of Moses, how chaotic it was. But normally, they don't celebrate birth. Now, I'm not saying that you do not commemorate the day of your birth. I think that is important, that we came into this world to give life to the world as God has given us life. That should be our duty, to keep the commandments so we can bring value to this world that the Lord has given us. But the question should be, if the Bible doesn't really emphasize the birth, because really what I care about is that Yeshua died and resurrected. Because if he's born, but then dies and doesn't resurrect, the whole birth is meaningless. But because this is such a big topic, and we grew up in a culture, again, cultural attachment, that this day is so significant, and they try to push the agenda of religion within a day that nothing happened in the birth of Yeshua. What I want to do today is show you biblically how the Bible gives us the information. But it requires for you to understand the temple service in order to get it. And again, that is the number one problem within the religious world, that the tabernacle and the temple and its services are not being researched. So therefore, you're never going to truly understand the time frame. Again, we're not looking for a date in particular. We are looking for the time frame to show you biblically that the birth of Yeshua did not occur in December. Okay? In another day, another time. All right? Again, remember what I said. If he did not resurrect, if the Father didn't resurrect him, then the birth is meaningless. So the fact that he is resurrected is really what makes all this work. Okay? All right, so let's continue here. Now we're going to get into the PowerPoint. I want to show you a few things, all right, I think that are important. Okay, so what we're going to be studying is the temple. The temple, I'm going the wrong way again. Okay, all right. The temple is the key to understanding the birth of Yeshua. To understanding the birth of Yeshua, the temple is paramount. Without the understanding of the temple, you're always going to have arguments and debates about who's right and who's wrong, when in fact, we should be focusing on the evidence that the Bible tells us. There's plenty here, so let's go there. So we're focusing on the temple and the New Testament without the Christmas tree. I have to throw that in there. By the way, this PowerPoint, just for disclaimer, is a PowerPoint shared by me, to me, by my teacher, Joseph Good. We have done the study. He had a PowerPoint. He let me borrow it. I changed some of the images, okay? But the PowerPoint and the research, he taught me, and he facilitated the PowerPoint, so I will share with you, okay? So we give honor to where honor is due for the work that he did and the research. Now, I've added all the stuff. We've been speaking all morning, trying to get more questions, trying to get you more ratified information, okay? So just make sure that we don't learn by ourselves. We always have teachers, okay? All right, so let's talk about the temple in the context of the birth of Yeshua, but we're going to take a different route. The whole topic of the days of the birth of Yeshua will fall under the category of sacred space. Now, sacred space is something that I think should be studied by everyone. And I think that if we understood what sacred space is, then we will be really careful how we mix what is biblical with what is not biblical. And we will make a greater effort to try to find truth and context within that. Because when we start mixing the secular with the holy, or teaching things that fall on the sphere of sacred space, and we're mixing it with the profane, then we fall into some serious problems in our theology, in our understanding, and in our walk. Okay? So let's continue here. Now, when you look into the story of Zechariah, and we're going to be reading from Luke chapter 1. Luke chapter 1. And it says, and there was in the days of Herod, a king of Judea, and a certain priest named Zechariah, of the division of Abia. His wife was of the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. And they were both righteous before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord, blameless. So they were walking righteously. Now, again, in this book right here, let me show you real quick. And this book right here, this is one of the resources that I'll be using today. Is Luke, is the, what is it called again? NICNT. It's called New International Commentary of the New Testament. It's really, really good. It's by Ellerman's Publishing Company. They have the huge set back there. If you see it, right there, they have the New and the Old Testament. Very well done scholarly work. He says something here, because the Luke chapter 1, it opens very interesting in verse 5. It says this: in the days of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah, of the division of Abia. But it's giving you a time frame. It's giving you the date of when Herod. So it's telling you when these things took place. We know that Herod, his reign was from the year 37. I'm telling you, Herod the Great, year 37 to 4 of the before Messiah, before Common Era, and then during the Common Era. So it puts the birth of Yeshua somewhere between, the end, between 0 and 4, okay, of the Common Era. And what it does, it really gives us a really interesting introduction to the social setting of the ancient world. Now, the way that the book of Luke opens is very unique. It's very interesting how he opens in contrast with the Greco-Roman world. And that's not really relevant for the teaching today, because, we're talking about a contextual thing, and I want to focus only on the birth of Yeshua using the story of Luke and Zechariah. In Luke, of Zechariah and Elizabeth, and the birth of Yeshua later on in the chapter. But if you have an opportunity to really study the social setting of Luke chapter 1 through verse 5 through Luke chapter 2 verse 52, it really shows you the whole eschatological perspective of the whole birth of John the Baptist and Yeshua and what it represented in contrast to the ancient Roman world. And that's why it's quoting from Isaiah and Zechariah. There's a huge eschatological perspective that Jewish people understood in the first century. And the story takes a very interesting, very interesting turn if you look into the social setting of it. But today we're not doing that. We're going to be focusing only on a particular aspect of the study. There's another resource that I want to recommend to you. It's very good. It's called the Jewish Annotated New Testament. And this one I highly recommend. They just came up with the second edition, the revised. Get the revised second edition. It's better than the first one. I actually got both because I'm comparing information, okay? Very good. It's written by a Jewish lady who is an incredible researcher. And they're taking all the Jewish context of the New Testament and giving you all of the references to rabbinical and Jewish principles and mindset of the first century. Very good resource. I'm also going to be quoting from the Mishnah, Kehati Mishnah. Okay, that's some of the resources. This has to be a must if you ever want to understand these things in the New Testament. Okay. All right. So with that being said, we know that Augustus Caesar was the Caesar at the time. We know that Herod the Great. The event at hand happened during his reign. We know who Zechariah was, but the verse is giving us more information. We need to find out what the information is. When I study the Bible, I do it a little bit different. That's something that Joseph Good taught me, is that when I study with him, one of the things he always does that is quite peculiar, he starts asking questions. Why, where, when, how come? Why is this red? And why is this? And where is that? And how come that is? And we begin to do research. Then I'm learning that blueprint of study, and I begin to ask questions. Today we learn a few things that I was not sure about, and because I asked the proper question, he gave me the right answer. So when you look at this verse in detail, it's telling you, in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zechariah of the division of Abia. Now that's a very important piece of information. We need to recognize what it is. Abia is one of the 24 priestly courses that was established by David, King David, during the time of his reign. When we go to 1 Chronicles chapter 24, in chapter 23, he establishes the order of services, and it's really interesting because through casting of lots, they come up with 24 priestly courses. And you got to read from verse 7 forward to get that. There were 24 Levitical courses. And there was also 24 courses or districts of Israelites. Now, that is a very important piece of information. As we continue in our study, we will see. But the reason why this is important is because once you understand what the courses were and how they function, then you can pretty much trace when John the Baptist, when Zechariah was in the temple and the angel actually revealed himself to him. And once you can place John the Baptist, his father Zechariah, in the temple when he was doing the incense, then you know exactly when John the Baptist was born, and we are informed that John the Baptist is 6 months older than Yeshua. So then once you can trace when John the Baptist was born, or the season when he was born, then 6 months later you know that Yeshua was born in that time frame. Okay, but we are using temple protocol in order to show you this. So let me ask you a question. And those of you who are in the chat, I want you to do me a favor. When you go in the chat, put in if you agree with me that if I could show, put yes or no, and you can say, if I could show you biblically that the 25th of December was not the day Yeshua was born, and I teach you biblically how you can do it, would you even need to mention Christmas to anybody? No, because you know there is definite proof in the Bible that he was not born on the 25th. So therefore, you don't have to get into that debate. When they ask you, how come you don't do the 25th of December? He says, well, I don't believe Yeshua was born this day. Well, how do you know? And then you say, well, have you studied the Luke chapter 1 in the context of the temple protocol? And they're going to say no. So therefore, now you have an open door to exchange, to share, to teach, therefore educate, and then let them make up their own mind based on the evidence. Evidence establishes truth. And remember, in the face of evidence, and there's no education, eliminates manipulation. Once you're educated in certain areas, then you don't need to be pulling on people's strings or whatever. You can stand on solid ground, knowing that your evidence is validated by the Bible, and then that's how we are able to we're able to help people out. Okay, all right. So when we read in the book of Chronicles, let's go there real quick. And we're going to keep reading on Luke chapter 1, okay? And then we'll go back to Chronicles. I'm going to put it in the PowerPoint. It says, but they had no child because Elizabeth was barren, and they were both advanced in years. So it was that while he was serving as priest before God in the order of his division, very important piece of information. Literally, it will take you 20 minutes, 30 minutes to find out how this works. If you never really studied it, it will take you longer. But I'm giving you the chapter. 1 Chronicles 24. It tells you that is according to his division from the line of Abijah. Then you need to go back to 1 Chronicles where it says in verse, let me see if this thing keeps going in order. Okay, let me follow the PowerPoint. If not, I'm going to get myself out of order. Okay, how did they serve in the temple? According to this particular reference, Backgrounds of Early Christianity by Ferguson, an amazing book that I have, okay, it says, the priests were divided into 24 courses, each of which was responsible for conducting the temple ritual for a week at a time, twice a year. So each family, they served twice a year. It says, and all were to be available at the great pilgrim festivals. That piece of information you must remember. And I'm going to show you more verses. I will explain a little bit more. Most of the priests, therefore, lived outside Jerusalem and were there only when their course was on duty. There was a considerable social gulf between the priestly aristocracy centered on the temple and the ordinary priests scattered throughout the country. Specific duties at the temple were assigned by lots. This is very important information. So in Exodus chapter 12 verse 1 says, and the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month will be the beginning of month, and it will be for you the first of the month of the years. It's talking about Nisan. Now, this is going to get quite interesting, okay? And I know people debate this all the time, but I'm going to ask you to allow me to present my information, okay? Just allow me to present the information. We don't gain anything by arguing and debating without really hearing each other first and hearing the evidence first. Okay? A jury must hear the evidence to give a proper rendering of a judgment. Okay? All right. So there were 4 New Years in the Bible. Okay? And I'm going to show you that in a minute. According to the Tractate de Mishnah Rosh Hashanah, there were 4 New Years. And these 4 New Years are actually connected to the temple. The first day of Nisan is the new year for kings and festivals. It's in agriculture and nature. Now, the first day of the month of Elul is the new year for tithing for cattle. Why do we need that? Let me explain a little bit. Why do we need a first year, a beginning of the year for animals? Well, it has to be a lamb of the first year. It has to be a 3-year heifer for the red heifer. It has to be, there are certain requirements of age for an animal to be placed on the altar. So therefore you need to know. So when does the first year of the animals for tithings begin? In the first of Elul. When does the first of the year for the trees? The month of Shabbat, I think it is. Okay, let me go back real quick here. My computer is not helping me today. There we go. It says, number 4 here, the first day of Shabbat is the new year for trees. Why do you need a new year for trees? Because, and the Torah tells us that you are to allow fruit trees to lay fallow for 3 years, and then you bring the bikurim. You bring the first fruits of the land, okay? And then number 3 here says, the first day of Tishri is the new year for the reckoning of years and sabbatical years. Okay, for sabbatical years and for the Jubilee. And according to Shammai and Hillel, they were arguing about whether or not it was also for the planting of trees and for vegetables. But that's debatable. But we know that the first of there were 4 calendars, and they were all connected with the temple. Nisan, because it's connected with the agricultural cycle. The animals, because it's connected with the tithing. Tishri is connected with the sabbatical years and the Jubilee, because you do not declare the Jubilee until the Day of Atonement. After the Day of Atonement, you declare the Jubilee year, the year of release. And because of the first fruits that you need to bring to the temple, you have to, when you plant a tree, you have to leave it for 3 years. So therefore, you need to know the first year of trees. Okay? All right. So, with that being said, let me go back a few here. I want to show you something. Okay? We have 2 calendars working together. One is religious, beginning in Nisan, that is agriculture and nature. And you have Tishri, that is called the civil calendar, that its function is to count the sabbatical years and the Jubilee years. Okay? All right. From the I think I got to go back. Where is it? Give me a second. I'll get it. There it is. From creation to Exodus 11. I want you to make a note of this. From creation, the book of Bereshit, Genesis, to Exodus 11, the whole world of patriarchs, they function under the civil calendar, Tishri to Tishri. From Exodus 12 all the way to the book of Revelation, because you deal with the agricultural cycles and the feasts. So the beginning of years for the religious cycle begins in Nisan. They both can work together without annulling each other. We are clear that the sabbatical years and the jubilees are declared during the Tishri. We are clear that the beginning of the year for the feasts, for the Moedim, and holy convocations begins in Nisan, according to the Torah. No one would argue that. Okay, so, but listen to how it reads, Deuteronomy 16. Remember, we were talking about Zechariah doing the service of the temple according to his division. We just explained to you that according to the Torah, the beginning of the year for the agricultural cycle, which the feasts are based of, starts in Nisan. That means that the 24 priestly courses begin their calendar year to serve in the temple Nisan. Okay, and I'll explain that a little bit after I read Deuteronomy 16:16. It says, 3 times in the year all of your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place where he will choose, at the feast of unleavened bread, at the feast of weeks, at the feast of booth, and they shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. Okay? So we have now a very interesting thing that it says that Zechariah was in the temple according to his division. According to the evidence we have, there were 4 new years, and the beginning of the year according to the Torah in regards to the feasts, in regards to the agricultural cycle, which are all the feasts are based of. They have to begin the calendar year for, it's like teachers. You know, the teachers, they have a calendar year. They end up at the end of May, they have the summer, and they begin the school year in August in certain places. So therefore, that works together with the rest of the Gregorian calendar. That doesn't do away with it. The same thing here. The priests will begin their service. Again, they will serve twice a year for a week. But all 24 priestly courses needed to go up to Jerusalem to serve during the high holidays, because of the verse that I read you, that all the males need to present themselves in Jerusalem at the 3 major pilgrimage feasts. So now we have all of Israel and all the 24 priestly courses, because there was a high demand for people. In this book here, I'm going to read it. Hopefully I'll find it right away. It had a really interesting commentary about the service. Man, when I need stuff, I never get it. So I hope I get it right here. All right? But it always happens. But it's a very interesting commentary. You see, and I don't get it now. It just, man, when I read it, it was like there was so much work they had to do in the temple. There we go. It says, the daily routine at the temple alluded to in verse 9 called the incense offerings before the morning and following the evening sacrifices, according to Exodus 30, verse 7 and 8. Philo sees in this practice an expression of special honor reserved for the altar of incense. Okay, because there was a lot of a great growth of people. There was a lot of people going to Jerusalem, so they expanded in the time of David from 8 in the time of Moses to and Solomon. I'm sorry, Moses 8 courses to like 24 because there were more people. So if you have more people going to Jerusalem, bringing more offerings, you need more help. So therefore, he established all of the sons of Aaron and all of the Levites to facilitate the service according to Numbers chapter 18, verse 1 through 19. Okay? So therefore it says, Luke notes that Zechariah belonged to the priestly order of Abia and refers to Zechariah's section as a time of service in verse 8 and 23. This terminology reflects the division of the priesthood into 24 orders or courses made necessary by the sheer quantity of priests. Each order will serve at the temple on a rotating basis during 2 separate weeks each year. This time of service extended from Sabbath to Sabbath during normal periods. That is, apart from the festival, which their increased temple traffic and extraordinary demands on a service, orders of priests were divided further. In other words, when the feast came about, there were so many people in Jerusalem that one family cannot do the work, so all 24 priestly courses go there. Now, why is this important? Because when you start counting, now we know that he is from the eighth from the line of Abia. So let's go there real quick. It says, now the first lot in 1 Chronicles 24, the first lot fell on Jehoiav, the second to Jedaiah, the third to Harim, the fourth to Seorim, the fifth to Malchijah, the sixth to Miyamim, the seventh to Hakos, and the eighth to Abia. So what we have here is 8 weeks beginning in Nisan, and then when the 24 courses went through, they start again, and then they start again with Yehoiav in Nisan again, the first week. Did you get that? This is confusing to those who maybe never studied the temple, but it's important to understand this, okay? So you have 24 priestly families. Each family will serve in the temple 2 weeks of the year in different rotations because you got 24 priestly courses. Once they serve, then you go recycle again. But then in Nisan, you start with the first week, with the first family, except for the high holidays. In this case, the feasts. All 24 showed up. Between Nisan 1 and Shavuot, we have 2 major feasts. In the 8 weeks of the service of Zechariah here, in the 8 weeks from the first name that you see on the screen, from Yehoiav to Abiyah, there are 8 people. And that means that it will be 8 straight weeks that the families will serve, each coming in at the Sabbath and leaving the next Sabbath. But when in the middle of those 8 weeks now, you have unleavened bread, which all the 24s come in, and Sukkot, Shavuot, which all 24 will come in. So you will have all of these families, and now we can trace exactly when Zechariah was in the temple when the angel appeared to him. Okay, just bear with me. We're going to get there. All right? Okay, so it says, the first course served the first week of the year, which is Nisan. According to the Torah, that's the beginning of the year, so the service of the first family occurs that year. The second course serves the second week. Well, who is the second course? If you read from verse 7 forward, it says, the first lot fell on Yehoiav, the second lot fell on Jedaiah. So Jedaiah will be serving the second week, I'm sorry. Now, the third week is unleavened bread. It's a whole week because of Passover. That's the third course served the fourth week. The third course will be Harim, does not serve into the fourth week because the third week of Nisan is Passover, unleavened bread. So all 24 courses would be there. So you have The first week of Nisan, one of the families will serve. The second week of Nisan, the whole family will serve. The third week of Nisan is unleavened bread. All 24 families come in and serve. The fourth week of Nisan, then the third family serves. Harim. Okay? And so on and so forth. Let's continue. That means that the fourth course serves the fifth week of the year. The fifth course, the fifth family of priests, serve on the sixth week of the year, which starts in Nisan, remember? The sixth course served the seventh week of the year. The seventh course serves on the eighth week of the year. So you would assume that then the Abiyah will be serving on the ninth week, correct? No, you have Pentecost. So therefore, all the courses served the ninth week of the year, as this was Pentecost. The eighth course, which is Abiyah, the course of Abiyah, served the 10th week, which would put the calendar at the second week of Sivan. That's in between May or June, depending on the year of the calendar that year. Now, I pray this makes sense. So now we know when the Bible tells us in Luke, let's go back to Luke. Watch. Now you can have context to this chapter. It's telling you what time of the year these events are taking place. Remember that the counting of the birth of Yeshua is beginning with a connection with John the Baptist, and I'm going to show you that in a little bit. Okay? Are you with me so far? This is the most difficult part. Stay with me. Because once we can trace their starting point, we can find the ending point. Get it? So therefore, when we're trying to trace where everything began, okay, because there's an encounter, okay, with Miriam and Elizabeth, and we need to find out when that encounter occurred. Once we know when that encounter occurred, then we got to trace it back to Sivan, because that's when the angel appeared to to Zechariah in the temple. Happened in the month of Sivan when he was doing the service. The text tells you that. It says in verse 5, in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah. The vision of Abiyah, we found out is. Now, that's the 8th family of the 24 priestly courses. And he had a wife and the daughter of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth, and they were both righteous before God. Okay? Let's read verse 8. Now, while he was serving as priest before God, when his division was on duty. Now, again, you may say, well, Rico, there's 24 priestly courses. He could have served in another time of the year. I agree with you, because they're recycling, remember? 24 priestly courses. There's how many weeks during the year? Okay, so they keep going around again. Fine. But the problem is that when you have Elizabeth and Miriam encountering themselves when now Elizabeth is 6 months pregnant, then you know exactly what time he was in the service. And this one points to Sivan, the second week of Sivan, okay? Right after Pentecost. Now we know where it was. We can trace it. This is how we can take biblical timelines. And if you're not aware of the temple protocol or the feast days and the seasons, you're never going to know. And then you're going to have the Catholic Church inventing a day of the birth of Yeshua, when the birth of Yeshua's time frame is actually all over the whole chapter 1 of the book of Luke. But we don't know the temple, so we never see it. So we have arguments and debates. No one wins, but no one thinks about going back to the temple, because the language is about a priest in the time of Herod, in the time of his division. But we don't know the division, how it functioned, how it worked, and we don't know when they started. No wonder we're confused. And that's what we're trying to understand here. And it says, verse 9, according to the custom of the priesthood, he was chosen by lot to enter the temple to burn incense. Okay? So now we trace them. We trace where they were. He was the 8th course of the priestly 24 priestly courses. And because of Passover, unleavened bread, and Shavuot, he is serving on the 10th week. So now we know it's 2nd of Sivan. Now that we trace, now we know when it started. So he left the service. He went home. It tells you right here. You know, when he finishes, he goes home. The text tells you that he went home. Okay? He was mute. He could not hear or talk. And then he finishes, he went home. And then she gets pregnant. Okay, a buddy of mine, he's actually here. It was funny. He told me, Jaime, he said, man, he had to go home and convince his wife that she was going to have a child, but he was mute. So, and he actually did it. So that's an inside joke. So anyway, but what we need to understand now is, now that we trace 2nd of Sivan, that we know he was there after Pentecost, keep that in mind as we do this. If you don't know the calendar, then you're not going to know how many months. The Hebrew calendar. Okay? And we're functioning here with the feast calendar, the religious calendar, which is Nisan all the way to Tishri. We're using that one from Nisan to Tishri, okay? There's another theory that Yeshua was born in Passover or in the month of Nisan. The Bible does not support that, okay? So we need to know the temple. In my opinion, I'm going to show you that. Let's continue reading here. Now, let's look into the service of the incense. According to the custom of the priesthood, he was chosen by lot to enter into the temple of the Lord to burn incense. Now, the Mishnah Kehati tells you that this was the first time he ever got this job, by the way. In the Mishnah, Tamid 5:2 says, and he said, and newcomers to the incense come and draw lots. They drew lots. Whoever won. Newcomers with old-timers come and draw lots, who would lift the limbs and for the rams to the altar. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, whoever lifts the limbs on the altar, he lifts them on top of the altar. So therefore, the text is telling you that the newcomers are the ones who were casting lots to do the incense service. That means that Zechariah had never done this job before. This was the first and only time he ever did this. Okay? You get this from studying ancient Mishnah. And by the way, because Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the name that you see right there, he wrote 3 tractates of the Mishnah, and he lived in the 1st century. He was a primary source. He was there. They wrote him down. They wrote it down, okay? So therefore, now we know that he did the service once in his lifetime. All right? All of this is connected to the prophecy of Messiah and the message of eschatology behind all of this that we never really consider. Now, burning of the incense. Burning of the incense in the Mishnah Tamid, I already read that, but if you look into Kilim 1:9, it tells you that they were doing the service alone. There were 5 people doing the service. One will take care of the animals. The other one will cleanse the menorah. The other one will do something else. But when he went in to do the service of the incense, he was by himself. So we now know that the rabbinical writings that tells us about what everything was happening in the temple can validate that when Zechariah was doing the service of the incense, there was no one with him. He was always to do it alone. You find that in Kilim 1:9. You find that in Mishnah Tamid 6:3. I have it right here. It says, the one who won the incense will remove the censer from within the pan and give it to his friend and to his relative. If some of it is scattered inside it, he will give it to him in his hand. They will instruct him, be careful, lest you begin in front of you, so that you do not get burned. He began to spread out evenly and departed. Talking about the incense. He says, the incense burner will not burn the incense until the official said to him, burn the incense. If it was the high priest, the official will say, my sir, high priest, burn the incense. The people withdrew, and he burned the incense. He prostrated himself and departed. So therefore, we know now, we can validate through ancient sources that Zechariah was by himself when the angel approached him. So now we know he was serving during the 2nd week of Nisan, Sivan, between May and June, and right after Pentecost. We know now that the service that he's doing, according to what we have here, lines perfectly with the storyline in Luke, based on the evidence that was going on in the temple. Let's continue here. And how would they determine the lots? They will go into what is called Lishkat Hagasit, which is the place where the Sanhedrin council would meet, which is Beit Aptinas. Beit Aptinas, where they used to make the incense, okay? They used to put the priest in a circle like that, and then they would extend out their hand like you see it on the screen. Now, this is very interesting. it doesn't show. It's not depicted here in the text, in the picture. But the way they did it, like for example, you see me. I'm not wearing a hat today. Okay. Well, in the temple, you cannot be with your head uncovered. You have to wear a turban, like you said, like you saw on the screen. So what the main priest will do, is he's going to start counting from one particular man, but he cannot count the men. So they will pick up the fingers, never the thumb, but always the fingers. So the man in the middle, this priest in the middle, will start the counting from the priest that removed his turban. So one of the priests will remove the turban, and that's the person. From that person on, they start counting. But we got a problem. The Torah says that you cannot be on the Temple Mount, and the priest cannot uncover their head. So what they did, they put a head covering underneath the turban. That's where the kippah comes from, guys. The kippah looks very different today, maybe what it looked like back then. But the priests and the Levites, they have to cover their head. And everyone who went to the temple in the first century, they needed to cover their head. That was the way you worship God in the temple. Okay? So the way they counted the lots was this priest is from here, so he removes his turban. He still have his head cover. And then everyone else raised their fingers. You got 2, you got 1, you got 4, you got 1, you got 3, whatever. So the priest starts thinking, okay, my number is 10 in my mind. So he starts counting 1, 2, 3, whatever. With whoever number fell, that's the priest who's going to do that job. And Zechariah did the incense. The only time he ever did the service, and the angel talked to him. Is this making sense to you? I can't just tell you a date and I'll tell you the whole requirement here, because then I'll leave some questions open, and I don't want to do that, okay? So let's continue here. So, now that we understand that, in Antiquities of the Jews, which is also a primary source, in Book 13, paragraph 282 and 283, according to the Winston edition, says, now, a very surprising thing is related to the high priest Hyrcanus. Now, this is the time of the Maccabean conquest, okay? During the time of Maccabean conquest. And it says, how God came to discourse with him, for they said that on the very same day in which his sons fought with Antiochus, he was alone in the temple as high priest offering incense, and heard a voice. So why is this historical information important? Because now we have two sources. Eliezer ben Yaakov, okay, who's a priest, and also we have the book of Luke, who tells us that he was alone in the temple, and now we have Josephus testifying the same thing, and they were all there at that time frame. So therefore, we can rest assured that the validation is here, okay? All right, so what did he pray? Okay, each service, you will do the shaharit, the morning prayers, or the offerings in the morning, the musaf during the feast, or the mincha, the afternoon. Had the same structure. They all had the same structure. They have prayers. It was divided into two sections. The morning, the first, they will do the keriyat korbanot, sacrificial service in the morning. The second was the keriyat ketoret, the incense. And the priest, the priest who was selected by lot, burned the incense and began the prayers. The prayers he offered were the 18 petitions. It's called the Shmoneh Ezrei Amidah. Okay? That's a very important prayers that they have, because in one of those prayers, they are praying for Messiah, who is the horn of salvation. Remember, if you look at the screen, they will put the incense by the horns of the altar of incense in the holy place. It's all connected, all right? Okay, so the next thing you do is, I'm looking from the north. From the top of the building. This picture comes from the app that we have. And I'm on top of the temple building, and I'm looking down toward the altar. I'm looking down and looking towards the east, to the Nicanor. Okay, and there's an area there. We talk about the Ma'amad. Who were the Ma'amad? They're the men of standing. It says, just as there was a rotation of the priests and the Levites, the Mishmarot, that's what they call the Mishmarot, okay, the courses. There was a rotation on the men of Israel too. The country was divided into 24 districts by David and Solomon. Each district, they send a delegation representing their district each week to the temple, and they send these men alongside the Levites and alongside the priests. This is what is known today as intercession prayer. These Israelites, they went into the court of Israel, and they would stand there all day long, doing rotations to make sure they were interceding on behalf of the priests and the Levites to be blessed in their service. Okay, so now you have 24 priestly courses, 24 Levitical courses, and 24 Israeli Maama, men of prayer, who will come down with each district to intercede on their behalf. Okay? All right. Where will they stand? They were known as the Maama Standing Men, as they stood as the prayers were said in the temple building by the priests, burning incense, recited the Shmoneh Esrei Amidah. The Ma'amad also prayed the Shmoneh Esrei at the same time. That means that the men standing in this location right here, if you're following my cursor, this location right here is 135 from north to south long cubits and 11 cubits wide. It's a big area, okay? It's a big area. They were standing there, and they were doing the 18 benedictions. The priest was doing the 18 benedictions. Now, let me take you to Luke chapter 1, verse 10. Okay? Let me keep reading this and I'll show it to you. Zechariah said to the angel, "How would I know this? For I am an old man, and my wife is well advanced in years." And the angel answered, said to him, "I am Gabriel, who stand in the presence of God, and will send to speak to you and bring you good news," good tithing, evangelion, okay? "But behold, you will be mute and not be able to speak until these things take place, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in their own time." And the people, watch this, and the people waited for Zacharias and marveled that he lingered so long in the temple. When I read my version, depends which version you're reading, okay? When he went in, it says, let me find it. Got the wrong Bible, so I can never find anything. The people were praying with him outside as he was inside. I got to find the verse. Give me a second. Verse 10. And the whole multitude of the people were praying outside at the hour of incense. Verse 10. It says it right there. The verse says it right here. And the whole multitude of the people were praying outside at the hour of prayer. Now we have the evidence that there were people. So that means that Luke chapter 1 has to and must be considered in the context of the temple service. We know who the priest was. We know who they were. You know who was the king, Herod. You know who the priest who in charge of the, incense that day, Zechariah. We know what they were praying, the Shmoneh Esrei Amidah, the morning prayers. Okay, let's continue. All right. Now, there are prophecies. Why do you need to know the importance of those prayers? Why? Why do you need to know it? Okay? Let me go here real quick and find one of my sidurs. And there are particular prayers that are important. Now, their 18 benedictions are all connected with the plan of redemption of God. I'm reading from the Sephardic Siddur, okay? Article Mizorah, Article Edition. When you read the morning prayers, the Shaharit, I'm not going to read them all, but when you read the morning prayers, it's quite interesting the sequence of how they are prayed. You have the Pesukei de Simra, which are the verses of praise, preparing yourself. Then you say the Shema and all the three prayers of the Shema. Then after that, you go into Shmoneh Esrei Amidah, okay? And it begins with a psalm. The Lord, open my lips that my mouth may declare your praise, okay? It opens with that. And then it says the patriarchs, talking about blessed are you, O Lord our God, God of our forefathers. Then it goes into God's might, that he resurrects us from the dead. Then it goes into the Kedushah, the holiness of his name, Kedushah. Your name is holy. Let me read it to you. You are holy, your name is holy, and the holy ones praise you every day forever, because blessed are you, O Lord, the holy God. Then you would pray for insight, repentance, forgiveness, redemption, health and healing, year of prosperity, the gathering of the exiles. And then there's a restoration of justice. Okay? The restoration of justice. Let me read the restoration of justice. The righteous and then rebuilding Jerusalem and Davidic reign. Okay, now this is what Zechariah is praying. So you need to connect the birth of Yeshua with the purpose of Yeshua, salvation, correct? Think about that. The birth of Yeshua brings the whole restoration of all humanity, because his role was to be the way of salvation sent by God, according to what the prophets and what the Bible tells us. So, when Zechariah is praying, he says, sound the great shofar of our freedom, raise the banner and gather our exiles and gather us speedily together from the four corners of the earth to our land. Blessed are you, O Lord, who gathers the dispense of his people Israel. Then he says, restore our judges as in earliest times and our counselors at first. Remove from us travail, sorrow, and groan, and speedily reign over us, you Hashem, alone, with kindness and compassion, righteousness and justice, and judgment. Blessed are you, O Lord, the king who loves righteousness and judgment. Remember who the king of Israel is. Herod, he's an oppressor. Remember who's the patron of Herod, the Caesar, Augustus Caesar, another oppressor. Remember that Zechariah is praying to God, this verse is, to ask God to remember his kingship, remember his righteousness, remember the exile, remember the kingdom, right? And then he talks about the righteous. On the righteous, on the devout, on the remainder of your people, the family of Israel, on the elders of the remnant of the academy of their scholars, on the righteous converts, and on ourselves, may your compassion be aroused. Please, Lord our God, and give goodly reward to all who sincerely believe in your name. Put our lot with them, that we may never feel ashamed, for we trust in you, and upon your great compassion do we sincerely rely. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, mainstay and assurance of the righteous. The next prayer is rebuilding Jerusalem. Dwell in the midst of Israel, of Jerusalem, your city, as you have spoken. May you expediently establish the throne of your servant David within it. Now, I want you to pay attention to these prayers, because I do believe that the angel appeared to him doing these prayers. It says, dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, your city, and you have spoken, and may you expediently establish the throne of your servant David within it. Remember that Herod is not from David. He's an Edomite. May you rebuild us soon in our days as an eternal structure. Blessed are you, O Lord, builder of Jerusalem. Davidic reign. Now he's praying for the Davidic reign. Okay, if we never consider the prayers in connection with the time when Zechariah was in the temple, while he was praying, why the angel came, honor the prayer, and also prepare the way for the prayer, for the Davidic righteous Samach, which is the root out of David that will be restored, in which John the Baptist was a precursor to the message of salvation. So this whole intimate relationship that is happening in the book of Luke is conveying the message of how is God going to combat the oppression of Rome, the oppression of Herod, and finally bring the Redeemer that he so much promised through the prophets in the book of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. And it says, the offspring of your servant David, may you expediently cause to flourish and enhance his pride through your salvation. We hope and look forward to your salvation all day long. Blessed are you, O Lord, who causes pride and salvation sprout. Okay? And it says, hear, O Lord, acceptance of prayer. Hear, O Lord Hashem Elohim, merciful Father, have pity and compassion to us, and accept with compassion and favor our prayer. For God who hears prayer and supplication are you, for you hear the prayers of each mouth. Blessed are you, O Lord, who hears prayer. And I believe that's when the angel appeared to him. Now the angel begins to talk to him. When you go to the story, consider that when he's doing the incense service, he is saying all of these prayers. He is calling out to God, saying, Lord, send your Messiah, send your anointed one, Keren Yeshua, the horn of salvation, right? And appeared to him an angel standing on the right side of the altar incense, and Zechariah was troubled when he saw him and fell upon him. But the angel said to him, do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer has been heard. Your prayer has been heard. And your wife Elizabeth will bear a son, and you shall call his name John. Okay? All right, so the story goes on. The prayer is being heard. You know, God is going to open the way of salvation. John is going to be the precursor to that message, the royal messenger. Okay? Now, there are prophecies in the book of Isaiah, and I'm going to really expand a lot on this. I want to get back to, the birth of Yeshua, but we need to mention this because this is part of the whole process as the reason why the angel appeared to Zechariah. Okay? Hopefully this is making sense to all of you. And it says, in that day, the day of the Lord, the branch, smach, and the Lord shall be beautiful and glorious. And the fruit of the earth shall be excellent and appealing for those of Israel who have escaped. Jeremiah 23, verse 5 and 6. Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, that I will raise to David a branch, samach, of righteousness. A king shall reign and prosper and execute righteousness and justice on the earth. Well, wasn't Zechariah praying for righteousness and justice? That's where the prayers are taken from. In his days, Judah will be saved, and Israel will dwell safely. And now what is his name by which he will be called? The Lord our righteousness. That's why Yeshua took care of the needy, the homeless, the widows. He took care of the marginalized and the oppressed. He took care of the hungry. He took care of the deaf, resurrected them. He healed the sick. He released the confined. Why? Because he is the messenger of God. He is the Son of the living God, bringing the righteousness of the Lord again on the earth. Let's continue. Let me move on real quick. Well, I think we got those verses pretty much cleared. All right? Now that we know, what have we found out already? We found that Zechariah was in the temple doing the incense and the prayers that we just finished talking about on the second week of Sivan, according to his priestly order, his division, which is the 8th family found in 1 Chronicles 24, which he was serving during the 10th week because of unleavened bread, the whole week, all 24 priestly courses they served, and also Shavuot, all 24 priestly courses they served. That means that Shavuot was actually a feast of 7 days too, and no one even talks about that. Something to think about, okay? So now we're going to trace from Sivan, the month of Sivan, okay? Let me show you, I want to show you the calendar real quick here. Show you the calendar right here. So you have Nisan, then you have Iyar, move to the right, Iyar, Sivan. Then you go from Sivan, you count 6 months. Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishri, Cheshvan, 5 months. And the text tells us that she was secluded for 5 months. The text says this. If you read in Luke chapter 1, it tells you that she was secluded for 5 months. Let's keep reading. Let me read on verse 15. For he will be great before the Lord. He must not drink wine, a strong drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit, even from his mother's womb. And he will turn many to the children of Israel to the Lord, and he will go before the spirit of the power of Elijah, and turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient, to make wisdom of the just, to make ready for the people, for the Lord, a people prepared. Zechariah said to the angel, how would I know this? For I am old, and my wife is advanced in years. And the angel answered, and Gabriel, stand in my presence and of God, and I will send to speak to you and bring you good news. And behold, he will be silent and unable to speak until the day of these things take place, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in their time. And the people were wanting for Zechariah, and they were wondering at his delay in the temple. He was taking too long. Okay, the Amidah takes, if you know the Hebrew, takes 20 minutes, 15 minutes. Doing it in English, 20 minutes. It's taking longer than that. Okay, it says, and when he came out, he was unable to speak to them, and then realized that he had seen a vision in the temple. And he kept making signs to them and remained mute. And when his time of service was ended, he went home. Verse 24, after these days, his wife Elizabeth conceived, and for 5 months kept herself hidden, saying, thus the Lord has done for me in the days when he looked on me and take away my reproach among people. So now we know that Zechariah was in the temple doing the incense, doing prayers, calling out to God for the restoration of the kingdom, restoration of the city of Jerusalem as the sole seat of authority, calling out to God for for Messiah to return, for the return to be there, to show up. And then all of a sudden, we have these events happening on the second week of Sivan. And then he leaves the temple after the service that took place for 1 week. I know I'm repeating things over and over because to some of you, this may be new. So the more I repeat it, I think it will be more ingrained after I'm done, okay? So the repetition is on purpose. So, second week of Sivan. He leaves the service. She gets pregnant. 5 months. So from Sivan, we have now Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishri, Chesvan. So now they have 5 months, Chesvan. If you keep reading the story in chapter 26, verse 1, chapter 20, verse 26 says, in the 6th month, Gabriel was sent from God to a city of Galilee. In the 6th month. From where? When you read that verse in isolation, you're not going to know from when. In the 6th month. From when? What is the event we're talking about? In Luke 1, from the appearance of Zachariah and the angel and Elizabeth being pregnant. That's the context of the chapter. Because if you look only at the text from the 6 months, and if you're counting from Nisan, then you're going to say, okay, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishri. So therefore, you would assume that the angel appeared to Miriam on the 6 months, which it makes sense why people think that Yeshua probably was born in Nisan. They're doing it backwards, but the events take place from Sivan. 5 months, Elizabeth is hidden. That means that until Chesvan. And then on the 6th month says, in the 6 months, which now Elizabeth will be 6 months pregnant, Angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph, to the house of David. You see, he's praying. Zachariah was praying for the root of David to be restored, and now you have the genealogy of Joseph and how he's from David. The virgin's name was Mary. He came to her and says, "Greeting, O favor one, the Lord is with you." But when she was greatly troubled at the saying and tried to discern what sort of greeting. Now that's a whole story between Gabriel and Miriam. So we're going to go from there, right? So she's conceived now, the 6 months. That month is Kislev, which is actually the 9th month in the calendar from Nisan, but is the 6th month from the time that Elizabeth got pregnant. That's the context. All right? Now, in verse 39, it says, "In those days Mary arose and went with haste into the hill country to a town in Judah. And she entered the house of Zachariah and greeted Elizabeth." Now, what event happens in Kislev? Hanukkah, which is the dedication of the temple. So now we know when we can place Elizabeth. She is pregnant 6 months in Hanukkah, in the month of Kislev. Okay? All right. So it says, "And when Elizabeth heard the greeting of Miriam, the baby leaped into her in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, with the Holy Spirit, and she exclaimed with a loud cry, 'Blessed are you among the women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And why is this granted to me, that the mother of my Lord, my Master, should come to me? For behold,'" watch this, "for behold, when the sound of your greeting came to my ears, the baby in my womb leaped with joy for joy. Blessed is she who believed that there will be a fulfillment of what was spoken to her from the Lord." We need to keep reading. Okay, it says, "And Miriam says, 'My soul magnify the Lord, my spirit rejoices.'" So she keeps going through the whole thing here. But then, if you read the verse later on, okay, Miriam stayed with Elizabeth for 3 more months. So now we have Kislev, then you have Tebet, Shabbat Adar. And then in verse 56 says, "And Mary remained with her about 3 months and returned to her home." Okay, remember, she conceived, Miriam conceived in Kislev during the time of lights, Hanukkah, right? That would have been, then you have to count Tebet, Shebat, Adar, Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul. Interesting. If she goes full term, that means that it's the month of Elul, somewhere at the end of Elul, or between Elul and Tishri, that Yeshua would have been born. Because we know, based on verse 56, that Mary stayed with Elizabeth for 3 more months. Now we know where we can trace John the Baptist being born. He was born somewhere at the end of Adar and the beginning of Nisan. Okay? It says, now the time came for Elizabeth to give birth, and she bore a son. But you listen to different versions. Let me read what this one says. In different versions, she came to full term. That's a very important term. What verse is this? 50 what? 57? Verse 57, let's see what it reads here. Now the time came for Elizabeth to give birth, and she bore a son. Okay? In another version that I saw, it says full term. See what this version says here, the Lexham. Let me go to the Lexham commentary. The Lexham, if we look at Luke chapter 1. Everything's slow today. Verse 56. And Mary stayed with her about 3 months and returned to her house. Now the time came for Elizabeth that she would give birth, and she gave birth to a son. Okay, so we know that she gave birth. In some other version it says her full term came. So we now assume, based on the text, that 9 months. So now we know the time frame of the birth of John the Baptist. That's the key. If you know when Zechariah was in the temple, the second week of Sivan, and then you'll know the time when Miriam got pregnant, 6 months after Zechariah, because the counting starts from there. Because Elizabeth was 5 months recluded, remember? So on the 6 months of Elizabeth's pregnancy, she meets Miriam, who just conceived, okay? And then 3 months later, John the Baptist, he is born. And then 6 months later, Yeshua is born. So instead of us focusing on exact dates, which the Bible doesn't give you, and honestly, I don't really care what exact date he was born. I do know, based on the Bible, he was not born on December 25th. And if we understood the temple service, the priestly courses, their service, when they begin, how they did it, which prayers there took place, then all of these arguments and debates will not take place. I need you to go back and look this up, validate it and verify it. But if you do not study the temple, please allow yourself the opportunity to research this stuff before you will have a debate on it. I mean, at least consider studying it so we can come to a better understanding, and better conclusions instead of fighting and debating about who's right and who's wrong. But let me ask you all a question, especially those in the chat here. Put it in the chat. How many of you have never heard some of the information I just shared with you today? Put yes or no. How many of you have never heard some of the information I mentioned today in regards to the prayers that were there, that were taking place, the time of the year that the priest had to serve, and how he served, and how many times the 24 priestly courses, needed to go up to Jerusalem? Without that piece of information, folks, we are never going to understand the birth of Yeshua, and we're always going to get caught in this tug-of-war of debating. So therefore, study the temple. If we study the temple, a lot of the arguments will end. And I really mean this. Ever since I started with my teacher, I'm telling you, a lot of the arguments ended. It's like, okay, I get it now. I understand certain principles, so I don't have to waste my time debating something that could be easily proven. Okay? So let me review a little bit more. Let me review a little more here, okay? I want to review a little bit more here before I got to finish, because I got to leave pretty soon. All right? So let's go to the computer. It says in the 6 months. Let me go back to what the 6 months says. We know Hanukkah was a time of celebration. We know that. Now Elizabeth full time came. One of the versions says that. So now we know that she went 9 months. Okay? We know that. And that would happen somewhere between Elul and Nisan. 6 months later, that would be somewhere Elul or Tishri. Okay, so if she gave birth in Nisan or Elul, that means that you have Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, that you have, now you know more or less when Yeshua was born. Okay? So we don't have to think, we don't even have to bring up December in any way. We don't even have to waste our time with that. So if they tell you, well, the argument is that Yeshua was born December 25th, you can argue until you're blue in the face with Christian brothers and sisters, and they're not going to believe it. Because it's connected with emotion, family traditions, culture, and theology to them. But let me ask you a question. Did I do a good job today presenting the evidence biblically? Because all the information is there, but what have we noticed? That although it's in the Bible, we needed to go back to its culture, its time and space, in order to understand the context of what we've been reading all along. If you never knew that there were 24 priestly courses that started the service in Nisan, each family in Nisan, based on Exodus 12, based off biblical verses that talk about that they, going for the feast, and the history that tells us how they did the incense, which prayers they prayed, then you're not really going to understand the whole chapter. The prophetic and the eschatology behind it. I need to do another teaching doing the social setting, the eschatology, the time frame, and the prophecy about the Redeemer, the root of Jesse being restored, which shows without a shadow of a doubt that Yeshua is the Messiah. So what I submit to you is this. Instead of arguing with people about detaching them from emotion, I mean, the reality is every time you see a tree, it smells kind of nice. I don't like them. I don't put them in my house. I would never will. But you can't deny that, hey, everything changes. You put a tree, oh, it smells nice. The trees look cool. I don't put them in my house. They look cool. I do the Hanukkah ones. Okay. But how can you go to someone that you don't know and accuse them of doing something they have no idea they're doing? That's what we've done. That's what I used to do. And for the last 15 years, I've been blessed to have a really good teacher for the last 10. But for the last 15 years, I've decided to learn, to educate myself, to look at a different perspective, never compromise truth. I'm not going to keep Christmas for nobody. And my family, if they keep Christmas, see you later. I'll see you the 26th or the 27th. I'm not going to compromise my values for them. I'm not going to judge them. That's their values. But if you tell me you follow Torah and you're doing that, then let me help you biblically, showing you that Yeshua was not born on that day. If afterwards you don't want to do it because you're connected with culture, emotion, and you just want to compromise the things that God says not to do, then there's nothing I can do for you. Then I cannot fellowship with you. But I'll do my best to help you, to encourage you, to teach you, to share with you. Look, today I was able to show you something about Christmas, and how many times did I mention Christmas? Maybe, 5, 6 times? I didn't talk about the fat guy in the red suit, not even once. Just now. Okay, we don't have to talk about it. Because our interest is to try to narrow down when the Bible points to a time frame when Messiah was born. Why should we focus on the day and try to put in a round peg in a square space, or a square in a round space, when in fact we have all of the evidence that fits everything together, and now I could disregard Christmas altogether because it doesn't line up with the Bible, and we have the evidence biblically to prove it. I pray that this teaching was a blessing to you. And again, don't believe what I say. Go back and look it up again, validate it and verify it. And I will continue to do it too. I have more information that I cannot present for lack of time, but I just want to give you a glimpse of how the temple can show us more than what you think it can, even showing us the time frame when Yeshua was born through the appearance of Gabriel to to Zechariah in the temple during the 10th week after Pentecost, from the 8th division of the priestly courses, the line of Abia, in which Zechariah belonged to. Now we know when Yeshua was born, somewhere around the late Elul, early Tishri. Which day? I don't care. He was born. The key was he resurrected. That should be, in my opinion, our focus. Resurrection of Messiah. Amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you guys. Thank you so much. If you're interested in some of this and you'd like to know more, please go to wisdomintorah.com. Okay. You can also see us on YouTube, or you can come to one of our temple courses in Orlando every year. And please consider studying the house of God. It will change your life. Shalom lehitraot.